Assalamu alaikum. And hello, everyone. I'm your host, Hannah Zaberi, and welcome back to another episode of Justice for All Now. Thank you so much for joining us on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim focused network. You can always watch us on Samsung Galaxy 19, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and soon Apple TV. Imam Jamil Amin, formerly known as H. Rap Brown, civil rights leader and humanitarian, was convicted of a murder he did not commit in 2002. Upon that conviction, we essentially abandoned him. Not everyone, but the mainstream Muslim community. No tangible noise was ever made, and as such, his conviction and subsequent exile, a vendetta realized, has gone unchecked. Um, Previously, his son has written that the cruel and unusual punishment, the confession of another man, the medical neglect in hopes that he dies, the gag order, the federal holding of a state prisoner away from his attorney and family. We've done nothing about anything. And because of our lack of action, much like the man himself, the truth about this case and his legacy have been erased from public view. Recently, Imam Jamil was afforded another opportunity to prove his innocence and salvage his name with a retrial. A new trial where the man who confessed to the crime can testify. Joining us today is Al-Hajj Mori Salahan. Al-Hajj Mori Salahan is a metropolitan Washington, D.C. based human rights activist, author, lecturer, and poet. His work has taken him across America and Europe, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and the Middle East. In the past, he founded the Ad Hoc Coalition Against Political Imprisonment and National Association for Police Accountability. He's also founded and served as the director for operations of the Peace Through Justice Movement, a DC-based grassroots human rights organization. Currently, he's the director of operations for the Afia Foundation, a grassroots Muslim-led human rights organization. In addition, he's written many books, especially his recent work titled The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil al-Amin, Is It a Government Conspiracy? And this book will be part of our discussion today. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mori.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, my sister.
Thank you so much and welcome on the show again. We love to have you on, alhamdulillah. And our audience has met you before, but aside from the introduction that I just gave of you, what else would you like to add about yourself in your and tell it to the audience?
Well, that's about it. You know, I strive to the best of my ability to be a committed Muslim. I strive to engage my energies, both physical and intellectual and spiritual, as progressively as I can, progressively within the Islamic construct of what progressive is, and that's basically it. Just trying to do my part before Allah Ta'ala takes my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, inshallah ta'ala.
So tell us now, what is going on right now with Imam Jamil's case? There have been some recent developments.
Well, the most exciting thing for me is seeing the attention, the amount of attention that has really begun to gel around Imam Jamil's case, and it's long overdue. I mean, Imam Jamil has been caught in this legal quagmire now for 20 years. And as you've already noted, for most of those years, he has not received the kind of support and attention that he deserves, especially being the person that he is, someone who was so prominent in the Muslim community and in the African American community. And within America's socio-political construct of struggle. I mean, he is a very prominent figure.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that he is now beginning to receive the kind of attention that he should have received years ago is, it warms my heart to see it. And also to see how diverse, how young and diverse the support is around his case, and the fact and the way that it's growing. Earlier today, there was a press conference at 11 o'clock in front of the Fulton County courthouse, uh, uh, and it was led by the Georgia chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, and the Islamic Circle of North America, in conjunction with IJAN, I should say the Social Justice Network of ICNA, and the Imam Jamil Action Network, or IJAN. They had a press conference today to call on the uh, district attorney, who is now in from what I understand, a very heated battle for re-election,
Mm-hmm.
calling on him to revisit the case of Imam Jamil. And, it's not just them. Of even greater significance, in my humble view, is the fact that one of the most prominent sons of Georgia, a civil rights icon in his own right, and the past mayor of the city of Atlanta, the past U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Andrew Young,
Mm.
has strongly come out with declarations of support, and calling for Imam Jamil's case to be revisited. So there's a quite a bit going on.
And I
Uh,
heard there was a rally today too at Malcolm X Park.
is
Um,
that right?
and apparently, just webinars on him have been.
Yes.
Last Sunday's webinar was viewed by more than two 2,400 people. Yeah, getting
Hmm.
messages from several people who normally I never hear of me from regarding this case, and now suddenly there's like, this is very interesting. I mean, it's
Yeah.
probably, and I know you have been pushing a lot of these organizations to take up these cases for a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Mashallah.
Mashallah. So, better late than never. So, w- why the push right now? Is it because of the district attorney's reelection? What has changed?
Well, for Imam Jamil's son, Kyrie, who has become a leading figurehead in his father's campaign for justice. Um, his emphasis has been on the petition drive for the purpose of exerting pressure around uh, uh, this reelection campaign of Paul Howard,
Mm.
and the person who was running against him for that office. Um, yeah, the thrust has been to use this reelection effort that Paul Howard is embroiled in, and from what I understand, it's he's been locked into a very arduous struggle to keep his seat, if I understand
Mm.
correctly. This is to take advantage of this moment, and to exert pressure on him to do what he should have done years ago. I mean, one of the unfortunate, and in my humble opinion, Sister Henna, despicable realities surrounding this case is that Paul Howard, an African American,
Mhm.
he used this case of Imam Jamil Al-Amin to really prop up himself 20
Mm.
years ago. He became the face that was used by the establishment to prosecute Imam Jamil. And as the lead prosecuting attorney in this case, he had the ability then to do as um, the late Coretta Scott King, a very prominent icon in her own right, what she called on the system to do uh, in the early opening days of the trial, after we visited her. I'll never forget. me and my brother Talal. Uh, During one of the breaks, it was one of the afternoon recesses. I think it was the lunch recess. During the trial, in the first opening days of the trial, we made a decision to go and pay Mrs. King a visit at the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And alhamdulillah, she received us in a very gracious way. And I gave her, some information that we had put together on Imam Jamil's case. And
Mhm.
we asked her to simply call for, if she would use her office and her position of prominence in the Atlanta community, to just call for a fair trial, nothing more, just
Mhm.
a fair trial. And wallahi, without any hesitation whatsoever, and I'm sure that that her immediate response to that request was also because she knew this man. She
Mhm.
knew his character. And, she herself had her doubts about what he had been accused of. But all she did was, I mean, well, let me say that she instructed us to come back the very next day. She said, "Come back tomorrow. I'll have a statement for you." And indeed, she did. It was a beautiful statement, well written. And in fact, the booklet that we published right after the trial ended with Imam Jamil's unfortunate conviction, um, we published a booklet within a few months. The case of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al Amin, is it a government conspiracy? And in that booklet, we featured, part of the letter that she had given us, and she also gave us permission. She gave us permission to make copies of it and to distribute it as widely as we saw fit, and we did. We gave it to, I mean, all of the attorneys. I mean, of course, the attorneys got copies of it, but all of the media that were there covering the case, and it was a very, very widely covered case by the media, by print media, by broadcast media. And subhanallah, do you know what happened? Within a few days of us distributing that letter, Coretta Scott King ended up being attacked
Oh.
in editorials, basically calling on her to, stay out of it,
Oh.
that she was, out of her place, and calling for a fair trial.
Wow.
And one of the other startling things that didn't happen, um, which I felt was a shame on the establishment then and remains so to this day, is that you know I never saw one of the civil rights leaders or organizations in the greater Atlanta area that came to her rescue, that came to her
Mhm.
defense after she was attacked in editorials for simply calling for a fair trial for Imam Jamil Al Amin.
Do you think post George Floyd has anything to do with this too?
Oh, yes, no question about it. I mean, there's no question about it, but that um, that tragedy, because of not just it being captured on video the way it was, because there have been many tragedies
Mhm.
that are equal in you know um, uh, horrific imagery that have taken place. There have been many, but the combination of that taking place when it did,
Mm.
when America and the global community is in the grip of a pandemic, and it has forced people to significantly um, uh, readjust their what constitutes normality in their lives,
Mm.
and it has also forced folk to kind of see the shortcomings within the governing apparatus that we have in this country. I think all of that has converged at this moment to provide an opportunity for a case like this to be revisited and to receive the kind of support that it has now begun to receive. Yes, this atmosphere has a lot to do with it. No question about it.
And today you're representing the Imam Jamil Amin
Action Network,
Action Network.
as
Uh,
well as the Afia Foundation, yes.
so tell us more about this network. Tell us when was it formed, how, and this has been a consistent effort. While many efforts have gone to the wayside, but this has been a consistent effort for over how many years, um, and how does it work?
I don't know the exact number of years,
Mhm.
but it has been a number of years that IJAN has been in operation and trying to keep the case of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al Amin alive.
Mhm.
And I want to say that it is to the credit of IJAN that, and I would like to add, the efforts that we've made as well, that this case of Imam Jamil has not died
Mm.
because, as you've noted, as you noted in the beginning of your monologue, we have not responded as a Muslim community to this case in the manner that we should have, especially given Imam Jamil's prominence before all of this happened. I mean, he was, before he became a political prisoner, the go-to man for many of the conventions and conferences that took place in America. He,
Exactly.
more often than not, he
Like,
was the keynote speaker.
so this would be like tomorrow if they put a case against, I don't know, Sheikh Yasir Qadi or an Umar Suleiman or even like, let's get closer, Zaid Shakir, Imam Zaid Shakir, right? Like, and not, and the Muslim community to not respond to that or stand up to that
Yeah,
or fight for him or raise his voice for him.
right.
Why? Well, I mean, we cannot imagine that today.
Well, it's fear. I mean, it's fear. You know, one of the most difficult things for a people who don't really have the confidence in their identity and in their own means
Mhm.
for being able to project and defend what that identity is supposed to represent. One of the most difficult things for us to do is to confront, um, you know, the powers of principality. You know, I call it the Pharaoh complex. You
Hmm.
know, when back in the time of the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when he confronted Pharaoh, um, and Pharaoh, he summoned his magicians from far and wide within his realm. You know, one of the questions that was posed to him by the magicians was, "What will be our reward if we successfully contend with this problem of yours? What will be our reward?" And what was his response? Nearness to me.
Hmm.
This is something that we as human beings we crave. We crave, generally speaking, nearness to power, nearness to, you know, prominence. You know, the celebrity culture. Um,
Hmm.
Globally in America and throughout the globe is based upon, this love for proximity to those who are considered to be beautiful people, people of influence, people of power. And and so when it comes to issues of justice, and especially issues that call upon people of conscience and people of faith to confront principalities on matters of justice, that becomes one of the most challenging internal jihads that we are called upon to confront. And unfortunately, not many of us are as successful as we would like to be in, meeting that challenge. That's just the reality. That's the reality.
He was arrested right after 9/11, and the 9/11 attacks had just taken place 1 year prior, and there was a drastic increase in Islamophobia and hate crimes against the Muslim community. And At that time, I don't think we had the terminology, the framework often to understand what was happening. This term Islamophobia, I don't think even existed then. Um, do you think the Imam Jamil's arrest could have been predicated on such discriminatory basis in light of the 9/11 attacks?
Well, actually, his case erupted before 9/11. It
Okay.
was, yeah, it was in March of 2000. And one of the reasons why this sticks out for me is I vividly remember after that whole tragedy unfolded on the west end of Atlanta. I remember very distinctly receiving a call. I was one of a number of Washington area leaders that received a call to come to Dar Hijra for a meeting,
Mm,
for a special emergency meeting around what was going on. And Imam Jamil had not yet been taken into custody. He was still, you know, um, being sought. And I never forget, we had this meeting where we discussed, you know, what should be the response to this tragedy that was already receiving national attention. But um, and then you know, and initially, and this is a very important point, initially it appeared that, especially from, you know, the presence of those who came, who were part of that meeting that took place, and then some of the discussions that went on afterward, it appeared that that the Muslim establishment in America was poised to do the right thing vis-a-vis Imam Jamil. That there
mm,
was going to be a substantive support for him, but
mm.
then, you know, some, you know, some time later when September 11th occurred,
Okay.
that is when everything changed. That is when everything changed. And Imam Jamil and his plight ended up being dropped like a hot potato.
Mm. And it's so important to document that because that's witness and that's American Muslim history. We unfortunately now with our paper, the Muslim link doesn't exist anymore. There isn't a lot of places where this history is being documented.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will count towards generations learning more about this case and as well as what happened to national leadership during that time. For those of our audience who may not, I realize that we haven't really talked about the case itself. I'd like to just briefly touch on that. Um, so we Can you describe the initial wrongful conviction of the imam in a little bit more detail, and then talk about the testimony of a person by the name of Otis
Otis Jackson,
Jackson.
aka Santos. Yeah, yeah. Imam Jamil, excuse me, it was the night before Eid al-Adha
Mhm.
when two sheriff's deputies, young African American sheriff deputies, were sent to the West End to serve a warrant on Imam Jamil. Again, it's very important that to keep in mind it was about 10 o'clock at night. It was the night before Eid, the
Mhm.
Eid celebration. They ended up coming in contact with an individual, um, and Imam Jamil also may have been present as well. In fact, I personally believe that he was. I believe that Imam Jamil was present. Allah knows best. Um, but because one of the things that this Otis Jackson said to me, I had an opportunity to interview him, to speak with him years ago. And one of the things that he said to me um, when we when we discussed Imam Jamil's case, He was in lockup in a jail outside of Atlanta. Um, he said that he became angry because of the way that these deputies were. He thought that they were disrespecting Imam Jamil. Now, clearly, this is an individual whose history, I've come to learn, is one of instability. He's in and out of jails and prisons. He's an unstable person, and he has the kind of temperament that fits precisely the scenario that unfolded on the west end of Atlanta. Someone who just lost his cool. He just lost
Mhm.
his self control and just went off. And he's someone that did not like police. And I've come in contact with personalities like that over the years in my work. Um, and so he fit the profile of someone who would do exactly what he claimed to have done. He said he shot the officers. He
Mm.
shot both of the officers, and and then so anyway, the short of it was that not only did he get into the gunfight, as he reported to me and others that he did, but he ended up also being wounded, and there was a blood trail. This is part of the evidence. There
Mm.
was a blood trail that led from the point of encounter to an abandoned house around the corner. And then later, when it was determined that Imam Jamil was not wounded when he was captured, because part of the APB, the All Points Bulletin for Imam Jamil before his being taken into custody, was that he would be wounded. But when they
Mm.
come to find out that he wasn't, and
Wasn't.
they were shocked by this, then all of a sudden the blood trail, the blood became something that could not be determined as being from
Mm.
a human or an animal. Uh, but then there was some other things. Um,
There wasn't
uh,
any fingerprints found. There, his DNA was not on the guns or the ammunition.
that's
How
right.
did the FBI justify the connection between Imam Jamil and the confiscated weapons?
Well, first of all, here is another one of the salient factors to this case. The FBI person who supposedly found the weapons was also an FBI agent who himself had a history of uh, having taken the life of an African American male in Philadelphia,
Oh wow.
reportedly shot him in the back of the head, and planted a weapon, claiming that he had this weapon. Um, this was an individual that when he came upon Imam Jamil, who was already on the ground in handcuffs, laying on the ground, face down, he kicked him and spit on him. He was that out of control.
Mm.
And so this was someone who it was felt could and would manufacture evidence in order to get his man. But it's again it's significant that the guns that were, the weapons that were reportedly found did not have Imam Jamil's um, fingerprints on them. And so we are led to believe that Imam Jamil had these weapons. And according to earlier reports from the authorities, he actually fired these weapons. And
Mm.
yet there were no fingerprints of his on the weapons. And then there was a number of other things. I mean, the warrant that the sheriff's deputies were there to serve that night, the night before the Eid celebration, was a warrant that was based upon a totally bogus scenario. It was a warrant that never should have been issued.
Mm.
And uh, so I mean,
It,
and it also followed a pattern of them trying to get Imam Jamil for whatever they could. There was an incident not too long, a few years before, where Imam Jamil was accused of having shot a young man, and the young man later said that Imam Jamil. He never said Imam Jamil shot him. He was pressured into saying that
mm.
it was Imam Jamil. He didn't know who it was that shot him, and so
At that time, it just even language about that, about the police, would not have been acceptable. It would not have been acceptable to talk about. So much has changed now, uh,
Yes, indeed.
with the curtains being lifted off and actually seeing what the prison system is for what it really is. The discourse has changed in this country, from so what, just bringing this case back up and, um, getting the testimony actually submitted in the court. What could this mean for the future of the United States? I mean, this could be someplace that this. I mean, how can the wider community, not just the Muslim community, all of these people, the Black Lives Matter movement, the abolition movement, all of them can. Would this not be the perfect case to take up for all of them?
Yes, it is. I consider it to be one of the most perfect cases to take up. And this is an argument that we've been making in different places among Muslims and our non-Muslim brethren. I mean, speaking of which, the late Congressman John Lewis, and this is a reflection of how much awareness there is, unspoken awareness of the significance of this case. I remember during the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, being down on the monument grounds. And even though I was not one of the speakers,
Mhm.
um, I did have access. They gave me access to the VIP section. Um, and I had an opportunity to have some words with the late John Lewis on Imam Jamil. And I said to him, in a respectful way, I wasn't belligerent, in a very respectful tone. I said to him, Congressman Lewis, many of us we're very disappointed with the fact that, you have been silent on Imam Jamil. You're from Atlanta. He is one of your congressional constituents. He and many of the members of his community, and you've known him from, back in the days of SNCC. And Andrew Young spoke up on behalf of Imam Jamil, and there have been a number of other, but you have not spoken up for him. We're very disappointed. I'll never forget the look on his face. I mean, he didn't respond, but the expression on his face said it all. I mean, he basically accepted the guilt. He didn't try to offer any excuse for or any reason for not speaking up. His expression, facial expression, said it all. Yeah, I haven't said anything. And what it comes down to,
Ajan has reached out to some of these movement makers, and spoken about, taking up this case and focus on this case. Some a lot of this is done on social media. Um, this is something that hashtag HRAP Brown. Like, what can be done to ride this wave from Ajan's perspective?
you mean from IJAN's
Ajan,
perspective?
yeah.
Yeah. Um, just more awareness,
Hmm.
more awareness. Uh, you know, each one reaching one, people that become aware, become and are concerned about the plight of Imam Jamil and what his case represents on the larger macro level, above and beyond him as an individual. Just doing what their conscience calls upon them to do, and
Hmm.
this is across the board. And I say first and foremost, for my own African American tribe. It's interesting that the and I see this often. Oftentimes, the folks who are the closest to a situation are sometimes the most negligent. Um, African Americans, both Muslim and non-Muslim, and especially African American leaders and activists, should have been on this case, beating the drums around it years ago. In the same way that, you know, Pakistani Americans should have been in the forefront of beating the drums for Dr. Afia Siddiqui. But so often, you know, even the members of our own tribe are, you know, some of the most reluctant ones to do, you know, the things that should be done, the obvious things that should be done in order to bring about some semblance of justice. And so, you know, I've been putting a lot of pressure, you know, on my African American brethren, including members of Imam Jamil's own Jamaat, who have
Mhm.
not been as actively supportive of their leader that they, you know, gave bayat to that as they should have been over the years.
I think maybe
Hopefully,
it's time to jump over that generation. This new wave, these Gen Zs from that area, from the Muslim community, from the African American community, they have no bars, like no baggage, no apologies. They are unapologetic and they will go after. And a lot of them perhaps don't know about this case. And this is what I'm just thinking, because the difference I've seen in the activists today, even from 5 years ago, even from 10 years, you know, there's this massive change. It's just not the same anymore.
I
And it's
agree.
brilliant and it's amazing and I love it. But,
I agree.
you know, so, you know, maybe it's too late for that ship has passed. Let's pass the baton on to this next generation and let them run with this case and speak on it, push for it. And this is something that I you know, like when you look at this case from even like just the social justice topics and conversations coming to the forefront, right? Uh,
Hmm.
his retrial and what it represents for the future of America. It's implicit and explicit biases, like everything that has been. It's like that. I can't remember his name. That young man that committed suicide after being jailed for so long
Yeah.
over a backpack.
Yes.
You know, he was you know, that anger over him. I can't remember his name right now. If my producer could put that up. Um,
I see his face in my head. I can't recall
yeah,
his name at the moment myself.
yeah, exactly. We're just
Yeah.
old.
Yeah, he
So,
was at Riker. He was locked up at Rikers
like
Island simply
exactly.
because he couldn't, you know, post bond. And subhanallah, is shameful. Yes, yeah, very shameful case.
So
Um,
we're gonna start talking about your book, but right before we talk about the book, I wanted to ask you, what does the wrongful conviction of Imam Jamil Amin and the essential silence after this, what does that say about law enforcement in the United States, the criminal justice system, and that what kind of reform do you think needs to happen to ensure this does not happen again?
okay, just before I answer that question,
Mm.
um, I need to take advantage of the opening that you just gave me to make a very important point
Mhm.
about the Gen Zs. First of all, I want to say to my graybeards, the graybeards like me, it's never too late. It's never too late. It's the time is always right to do right.
Okay.
All right. But I would also say to the Gen Zs within my own tribe, the African American Gen Zs have not been as supportive, as responsive to this challenge of Imam Jamil as they should have been, and this is an opportunity for them as well. And as an example, I'm going to give you an example. Every year there's the Riyada, the annual Riyada, which was established by Imam Jamil and his Jamaat. It's a wonderful activity that, you know, Muslims all over the country and non-Muslims look forward to each year.
Mhm.
Last year it was held in Atlanta. And in fact, you know, in the years that it has been held, well, I'll just stick with last year. Last year it was held in Atlanta, Georgia. And the organizers of that activity, which went very well, was well organized. These were Gen Zs, most of them African American.
So
Um, uh, and
between the
but
between
Imam
the
Jamil
ages
was
of
not,
20 and under, 21
huh?
and under, between the ages of 21 and under.
Oh, that's Gen Z's 21 and under. That's the Gen
Yeah,
Z 21 and
that's
under.
Gen.
Okay, all
I'm
right.
Gen X.
Okay.
I'm talking about
Well,
Gen X.
okay, okay. Well, there. Okay. Well, no, it was Gen X, and
Okay.
maybe a handful, maybe a few Gen Zs thrown in for good measure. But anyway, this is an opportunity for the Gen Zs, the Gen Xs, and all of the other alphabet soup gens to get it to start getting it right. Now, getting to the question that you asked, uh, please remind me of what it was.
So I wanted to talk about what this case what does it say about the law enforcement and criminal justice
Oh,
system in
oh.
the United States, and what kind of reform needs to happen?
Well, what this says about the case, in the immediate aftermath of George Floyd, there has been a tremendous amount of attention and justified attention placed on policing in America. The way policing has, historically, traditionally been done from one part of the U.S. to the other.
Mhm.
What the case of Imam Jamil um, Amin, the former H. Brown, signifies is that the an equal amount of attention needs to be placed on the whole criminal justice apparatus across the board. All right, not just policing and the way policing is done, but also on the way that the judiciary operates, on the way that the federal police, the FBI, and other federal agencies, how they operate. Um, you know, Attention on the fact that COINTELPRO is still alive and well. It may have been formally put to rest, but COINTELPRO lives. And not only does it continue to live, it is on steroids in the day and time in which we live. I mean, many of the aspects that they were calling for, to be implemented during COINTELPRO, many of the things that were being done, they're being done today now out in the open. And, with a certain level of pseudo uh, uh, you know, what is the term I'm looking for? I mean, it's acceptable. It's become
Mhm.
acceptable what is being done, and it goes way beyond what was being done, behind in the shadows during the days of COINTELPRO. So what this case of Imam Jamil shines a light on is the fact that the whole criminal justice apparatus needs to be reformed. It needs to be reformed. We are being reminded of the observation that was made by Niccolo Machiavelli in his celebrated work that is still being studied throughout the world, leading universities throughout the world. The Prince. He said there are two ways of fighting. One is with arms, and the other is with law. We have been able to see time after time after time how law is used as a weapon of war. So this is what the Imam Jamil's case exemplifies.
So true. Let's talk about your book. Um, so it's titled "The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Al Amin, Jamil Abdullah Al Amin. Is it a government conspiracy?"
Yes.
How did you plan for this book and write it? What has it been a work in progress over all these years, and built up on your previous smaller booklets, or did this come about after this retrial that took place last year? Um, Tell us about the book.
We published the booklet, The Case of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al Amin, the small booklet, back in 2002.
Mhm.
Um, the booklet ended up having two runs after we sold out of the first booklet, which was maybe two or 3,000 copies. We printed another run, and then that was it. The booklet was out of print for years, and I was getting calls, constant calls from Imam Jamil's supporters, and others, Brother Salakan, do you have any of the booklets? Can we get copies of the booklets? When can you you need to republish the booklet. And one of the main voices of that was reminding me was the late Imam Khalil Abdul Rahman, who passed away. He was Imam Jamil's spokesperson, official spokesperson, all of these years before he passed away about a year or so ago. And he would remind me and sometimes convey to me messages from Imam Jamil asking about when the booklet might be able to be reprinted. And I said to them that as soon as we were in a position to be able to do it, we would do it, and we would make it, try to make it a book instead of just a small booklet. And so it was, it was years in the making, but alhamdulillah, we finally was able to pull it together. And what we did was we added some other voices besides my own. And this is what adds to the weight of significance of this book, the voices of others beyond my own voice, that are basically, calling, making the same argument in different ways for Imam Jamil. And one of the most important chapters of this book, for me, one of the most important chapters, is the chapter that uh, uh, that contains the chronology of Imam Jamil's public life from his days as H. Rap Brown, from when he first emerged as a student leader, as part of SNCC, even before SNCC, and then becoming one of the leaders of SNCC. I think the fourth in line, of either the fourth or fifth in line of SNCC, and then going on to becoming one of the leading voices within the Black Power movement, and then on to becoming a political prisoner at Rikers Island and in his embrace of Islam. This chronology that begins with his public face as a young, very young, early 20s H. Rap Brown, all the way to where he is today, is it is worth the read all by itself. That this one chapter is worth the read of this book, because it gives the reader a tremendous amount of history, what has taken place in this country. Some of the most, the 60s was one of the most challenging decades in American history, and one of the most formative, decades in American history. And so you get an opportunity to get a glimpse into what that decade was like by getting this snapshot of what was happening with H. Rap Brown all the way through Jamil Abdullah Amin. It's again, just that one chapter alone is worth the read. But there's a lot of other wealth of other good material in the book as well, including the voice of Andrew Young, former ambassador and former mayor Andrew Young, not only voicing his belief that Imam Jamil um, is innocent, he believes he is innocent, but also calling on this newly established integrity unit. The former name is the Fulton County Conviction Integrity Unit, calling on them to revisit his case. So yeah, there's a wealth of information in it.
Thank you so much for being here today, Brother Jamil.
Alhamdulillah,
We wrap up
alhamdulillah.
the hour. Buy the book. You can find it on the Afia Foundation website, on Brother Maury's Facebook page, the link. We've shared the link in the comments on our Facebook page. Get involved in the Free Imam Jamil Amin movement. All of you watching, listening, this is a call to American Muslims from all of us who are concerned about justice.
Absolutely.
So much for being here today, and assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, my sister. Thank you for having me. May Allah Ta'ala bless you and bless the organization and bless the network. in the days and years ahead, inshallah ta'ala.